when I was really young, I knew I'd love to take care of people. And I was a candy striper, and I was like, I'm gonna become a doctor. I was really like, I'm taking care of people. I wanna save lives as a little kid, you know? Cute idea now. And I started doing candy striping, and I recognized, you know, this isn't really gonna work for me. There's just something about the system that just seems so screwy. And like, they're not even talking to the people. I thought we'd be sitting on the beds. I can clean bedpans, no problem. But I thought we'd also be sitting on the beds, like hanging out with them and like talking to them and listening to their stories so they could heal. And I recognized like that wasn't happening there. It wasn't even allowed. And so I just kind of pushed a little bit of my wanting to, you know, take care of people, my service orientation a little bit aside. Plus I became very fiery and very pitta. I became a very fiery, you know, teenager. And, you know, 80s was the best time to be doing hair and makeup, and I was like, I'm all about hair and makeup. I'm gonna be a hair and makeup artist. And I'm gonna quit school in my junior year, and I'm gonna become a hair and makeup artist. And my parents were like, there's just never anything stopping you, but you are making a mistake, but I can't stop you. And I went to my counselor and was like, I'm quitting school, and he was just like, there's a vocational program. Like, you could go to beauty college half day and go to high school half day. You get, you know, cosmetology degree and a high school diploma. Like, sound good? And I was like, that's awesome. So I did that. So when I graduated from high school, I had a cosmetology degree also and an aesthetiology degree. And I was doing hair and makeup, and I loved it. And I still cut some hair. It's like this creative outlet. I sometimes have to have hair parties just to get out of my space. And so there was this man, I used to go and check out the hair salon, and there was this man that was so good at cutting hair, amazing at hair color. And I used to just sit outside in the glass window and just watch everybody in that salon, like, I'm gonna learn this. And I finally got the guts, and it was my dad's idea, and I got the guts, and I went in, and I was like, you don't have an assistant. I've been watching, you don't have an assistant, you need help. And he was like, nobody wants to work with me. And I was like, why? And he was like, I'm HIV positive. Nobody wants to touch my scissors, nobody wants to be near me, period. Like, you know, very fear-related time with the AIDS epidemic. And I just was so torn up by the concept. And I was just like, I could take care of you, I could make sure you feel good, and, you know, and I could also, you know, help you. And I remember being like, I'll wear gloves, you know, because I kept thinking, like, doctors wear gloves and they work with sick people. Why can't I put on gloves and work with a sick person? Like, this doesn't make any sense to me. And so I went home, and my parents were very scared, and there was a lot of unknowns. So they set very strong parameters around, you know, sanitation and, you know, different things. And I said, I'll do it. And I became his assistant. And as I became his assistant, he got really comfortable with the truth of kind of where he was at and what was going on for him, because it wasn't a personal struggle anymore. He had support. And he got very sick, and he very soon after, about 6 months after I started working with him, had full-blown AIDS. I was getting pneumonia constantly, and, you know, pretty much becoming bedridden quickly. So that's what I did with my senior year of high school. After beauty college, after high school, I then went over and took care of John. And I just remember being like, oh my God, I love this. I mean, it was clear he was dying, but to me, that wasn't scary. I was like, people do leave the world. I mean, that's, you know, obvious. And it just didn't seem like a fear thing. And I just was like, I think I really wanted to learn more through him. So I started studying the immune system and figured out that it's also called the lymphatic system. Everybody know there's two names for one system? So your lymph and your immune system are the same thing. In Ayurveda, they call it Rasa, the river of life. It's that important. The river's got to be flowing. And I started, you know, just like, I got to touch him, and I need to like help him, and he needs good food. And so I just kind of took it on as a project, and I just really loved him anyway, so it was fine. And I started learning lymphatic massage. So by the time I was 19, I was a lymphatic specialist doing shiatsu and lymph massage. And I moved to San Francisco, started working with people with AIDS there for many years. And he was the start of that. And he said to me one day, there's going to be something in this drawer for you when I leave. And I want you here when I leave. And there's going to be something here for you. And I remember being like, yes, I'm going to get that Buddha head on his mantle. Like, so obsessed with that Buddha head. I didn't know what Buddha was. I didn't grow up with Buddha. You know what I mean? It was in the middle of the 80s. You know, and 18, 17 when I first saw it. And it was just this mystery thing that I needed to know more about. And I was like, I'm getting that Buddha head. You know, I just like, I don't know why, but I just was like, that's mine. I probably asked enough questions to know that he was giving it to me. And so he passed, and I was the one who was there with him. And we had a beautiful 3-day vigil, and you know, anointed him, adorned him. Me and his partner adorned him with flowers, and you know, I did my first home vigil, my home hospice, where you put the person on dry ice, you know, and preserve them so that people can really be in witness. He felt it was important for people to look at AIDS, you know, to look at it, to see it. You know, he didn't want to go with like shame, and I thought it was so brave. And the day came after the vigil, I was like, I'm opening this drawer, get my Buddha head, it's time to go home. And I opened up the drawer, and he left me a pile of his life savings cash.
Damn.
Just left me this pile of cash. And he had mentioned a life savings, but you know, and it wasn't an extreme amount, but it was definitely substantial for a, you know, 18-and-a-half-year-old. And I just was like, oh my God. And there was this tiny little note sitting on top. I still have it. And it said, choose health, not beauty. And it changed my whole life.
Wow.
Like in an instant, it took me right back to that first, like, wow, this is about service for me. And what is beauty anyway? Even as I was studying beauty, I was like, it's in the inside. It's not just the outside, or we would all look the same, or you know what I mean? We all have our own beauty. I can see that in anyone. So I took it as this like life mentor support. Like John left me this note that could like take me my lifetime, you know? And I took his money and I learned clinical aromatherapy, and I learned Western herbology, and I got certified further in different forms of massage. And I just studied. I just studied and studied and studied until I was 23. And I was with my Tibetan monk for many years, teaching me Ayurveda. And I finally just was like, I need more. And he was like, go to India. You need to go. You need to go to the homeland. And so I took the last bit of it and went to India, and you know, kind of continued my journey from there. I lived in India for 2 years and ran an infirmary there, and just kind of things progressed from that point on. But it was just that little tiny, you know, when you get that little like, oh my God, this is so true, I cannot deny this. But it has been kind of my driving force ever since. Just this idea of like internal beauty, and what is it to be beautiful, which is really to be happy. And I think a lot of happiness comes from education and understanding. I don't think it just comes from, you know, keeping your body clean inside, which some people get really, I think, trapped in that concept too. Got to be clean, 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 when really we're not just clean. You know what I mean? And we're a well-designed machine too. That actually, when you're calm and rested and just doing the simplest things in life, it's amazing how much the machine does its own cleaning. It does its own work, you know, for us. So sometimes I think people try a little too hard, you know, and not just let our bodies really be when they are good, just let it be good. You know, all this passion come from, I've been very supported, and that's why I feel really connected to supporting people, is that, you know, I'm like, I've been supported, why would I not like give it back, you know? And that's another piece of Ayurveda. Ayurveda as a philosophy called science of life, or life knowledge. It's also known as knowledge of longevity, long life. It's based on the more something is gifted or you find it yourself, the better it works. So the medicine is based on donation and service, what we call seva. So when I started the Dhyana Center, that's why the first thing I did was to open the donation clinic. And I've been running that for 22 years, you know, just in case you're looking for support and you're wondering how to get it or you don't have a lot of money, like the donation clinic is always there. But it is a foundation of Ayurveda to make sure that, you know, we're giving to each other and making sure we're also making decisions for ourselves. So there's 4 tiers in Ayurveda, okay, 4 tiers of health as a foundation. First tier, emotional, psychological. I don't think this is in here, but I feel like sharing. So emotional, psychological, okay? If you can witness your emotions and do the opposite or solution-oriented or, you know, deal with it however it looks best in the moment, make a choice on what to do by witnessing something doesn't feel right, it's considered that you are gonna stay healthy. Your machine's gonna stay oiled and juicy and got enough fire, and, you know, everything works well if we're emotionally. Now, that's a tall order because we, you know, we have karma, we have parents we pick to work out details, we have life we lived, things that have occurred, patterns that we just live with. And so they believe that all emotional patterns become eating choices. So food is medicine is actually the second tier of Ayurveda. And that means that food is the primary medicine, very much including spices, where you get all your blood building, your minerals, your vitamins. That's why there's so many colors and smells and aromatics. They're just full of medicine. But it all goes on the food. So how do you let your food be your medicine, and how do you make food taste good and be medicinal at the same time and individual to you? Like when you run hot, you need cold foods. Not just I'm hot and I live in the box and that's my constitution, so I never get cold food. If you get cold, you get warm food. You know, you eat accordingly, you know, so it ebbs and flows. Then emotion and food is medicine. Our 4th tier is supplements and remedies. So when do you need to supplement? Meaning like the emotion is something's going on emotionally because it happens. Something's going on with food because our emotions become our eating. So you're in your habit or your patterns, whether that be not eating, eating too much, eating the wrong things, or eating what you think is totally right and it's not right for you. Like somebody who runs super cold and they become the raw foodist. Raw food is super healthy for people who are wet and congested and hot, but it mimics cold, so you're just gonna get more cold. So, you know, really being able to look at that. But when all of those things don't quite work, what they call quantity and quality of food, then we end up needing to remedy. We're gonna have to add in extra remedies. We're gonna have to add in the supplements, taking vitamins and minerals, or needing a tincture or a capsule. You know, all of these things are considered. And that doesn't mean it's bad either. You don't wanna look at supplementing as bad. It's part of the tiers of what keeps us healthy. When do you need to, you know? Then, when do you need somebody outside of yourself? When do you need advice? So the first 3 tiers of Ayurveda are self-care related. What can you figure out for yourself and do for yourself that is going to keep you, show you you're getting healthier or keep you healthy? But when you need advice, really important to know when. Now, I think we need to get more advice than is common in this science because we are not knowing how to even look sometimes at our emotions and do something opposite. We're not taught hot symptom, I need cooling, cooling thoughts, cooling bath, cooling foods, you know? We're not really taught that game of like how I feel I should do the opposite, and that would just balance me out elementally. So it's that simple. You don't want to get too caught up in Ayurveda where we start getting into like Vata and Pitta and Kapha and Samprapti and which are stages of disease and the Rasas and Tejas and Ojas and like all these things that if you look up Ayurveda, you're going to see a lot of Sanskrit. Now I know that, I'm classically trained and I like it because there's so much energy in those words, but you don't have to learn Sanskrit to use Ayurveda. And in fact, if I was even going to take it global, because I like the idea that not everything's just about Ayurveda in India, if you looked at it globally, there's one thing that every traditional medicine has in common. Like we're always like this modality or this one or this culture's theory or this culture's theory. You don't need to pick one. You just need to figure out the communication of the country and where did they go with the premise of the elements. Every traditional medicine has one thing in common, and that's that they said, Mother Earth, we tick just like that. Let's figure ourselves out elementally. And they also saw that nothing exists without the elements, and so we can't exist either. So we are of the elements, you know? So ether, air, fire, water, earth. Some cultures say hot, cold, wet, dry, like shamanism. Native Americans say northeast, southwest. They do the directions. In the eclectics in Europe, they do a lot of winter, spring, summer, fall, like call it by its season. And Tibetan is wind, bio, phlegm. Chinese medicine is metal. Let's see, it's air, wind, metal, wood, fire, damp. And Ayurveda is Vata, Pitta, Kapha, which is change, focus, nourish. That's what those words mean. Vata means change, which is in your book. Pitta means focus. Kapha means nourish. If you could change, focus, and nourish as needed, when it was needed, by witnessing, do I need more change or less change? Do I need, more focus, less focus? Do I need more nourish or give nourish? If we could answer those questions and do the one that seems right, you're basically doing the balancing act of the elements. Changing, focusing, and nourishing as needed. But again, don't get too fixed like you're going to figure this out and do it perfect and then forevermore you'll be better. Because, we're humans. And the word perfect does not exist in Ayurveda. You can't find it in any of the Chakra Samhitas, the Ashtanga Hridayams, the Shashruts, those are all the main encyclopedias. Nowhere. The word perfect is not there. And I love that. Because we're not even born perfect. So how are we supposed to try to attain perfect? You know what I mean? Everything's just, again, ebb and flow. Can you figure out where you're at, call it out, which is my job tonight, to teach you symptoms. How do you call it out? And then do the opposite. So I think thinking hot, cold, wet, dry, that rolls off the tongue, but the actual order is cold, dry, hot, wet, because it's ether, air, fire, water, earth. So ether is empty space. If I had all this furniture and everything was out of this room, it would be colder in here. The more empty space, the colder the space. The more matter you put into a room, the more it'll absorb heat and it'll change and it won't be so cold. So the first element is space, ether. Nothing happens without empty space. Each element affects each other. They don't stand alone at all. So the reason in Ayurveda they make ether, empty space, and air, which we also call wind, it's basically air in motion. The reason they put those two together and call it one word, Vata, change, is because there's only empty space until something happens in it. And then you've got movement, which is air. Whether we open the door in the morning, it's all still at night. We open the door, all of a sudden there's motion in here. Even if a leaf fell off when no one was here, it would change the flow in the air. So ether and air are constantly working together as a unit of elements. So that's why they pair them down into one. And the mantra of Vata of change is the leaf never lands in the same place twice. So it's actually constant change. That's why people when you feel too Vata, does everybody know these words in a little tiny form or brand new? Okay. Because, you know, the word vata, people will be like, around here, someone will be like, oh God, I'm so vata. And really what they're saying is like, I'm feeling so chaotic and scattered. Because, you know, vata, when you feel a lot of vata, you're kind of like out in the ethers and you're like, I don't know, and I can't decide. And, you know, everything's kind of up in the air, you know. And so those are common early stage emotional ways of being able to be like, wait, I might be getting too vata right now. I might need to sit down and ground out. I might need to drink a glass of water, maybe a cup of tea. Something really simple could shift it, but you'll have to be willing to do the opposite. And sometimes it makes it really hard to sit down because you're kind of like, well, I'm kind of freaking out, but I kind of like it, you know. And then we have to kind of like, wait a minute, how do I change this? So you have to let the change happen. But that is kind of what vata represents in its premise of the elements. Then ether feeds the air, motion enkindles fire. If a fire doesn't have some air pockets in it, you can't have a fire. So the way we sustain and create fire is by having air and kindling it. So now we have ether feeding air, air feeding fire. Fire does an interesting thing for water, the next element. Too much fire makes the water boil, so it changes, it morphs the water. So too much fire, or you know, a lot of fire, boil water, great if you want hot water. But, so it's amazing what he can do. Mm-hmm. But if you keep boiling and you don't have any control of the fire, which we know we have to control fire, right? I mean, everyone knows that that's the one element that if you don't control it, not okay. So it'll boil and evaporate, and then you end up with nothing. So if you have too much fire, it's going to dry you out. A lot of people don't think about this, because in Pitta, it's not just fire. The word Pitta, of focus, is fire and water. So you always have that balance for fire. Fire is not okay standing alone, especially if it's being enkindled by air on the other side. Without fire, water turns to ice. So you have inertia. Things get stuck in the body without adequate fire because we go cold. So fire's a little variable there. You know, if too much, you know, I always make the joke, like this is, you know, the perfect story of Goldilocks. You know what I mean? Not too hot, not too cold, just right. And I think about that, and I'm like, actually, that's kind of true. When you're eating porridge or having a cup of tea, like too hot or too cold doesn't feel just right. So she really was looking for that, like, I want balance. I don't have a home, you know? And I think about that, you know? So we want warm. You want to enkindle your fire when you feel cold. You want to tame your fire, which is anti-inflammatories. You want to cool the fire. We say this all the time, chill out. You know, you want to tame it when it's too high. Okay? And then water and earth. So Pitta is fire and water. And then Kapha is water and earth. I'm going to explain why water's in two places next, if anyone's already thinking about that. So this is water and earth. Now this is flow of water. So this is liquid exchange. This is also the waterworks in the body. And it is going to be about if I need water to get over to the laguna way over there, I'm going to need some kind of trough to get it there. If I just dump it out on the street, it's just going to go all over the place. So water needs structure to get from one place to another. So it gets structure for innate flow by earth. So water and earth make up Kapha. So that's going to be like how you form a lake. The oceans are lakes in the body. The kidneys are the oceans in the body, waterworks. And then we have the lymph and the blood vessels that are all showing us those streams, the rivers that need to get liquid from one place to another. So anything liquid exchange, any fluid that needs to get from one place, I mean, even a glass of water needs a vessel. Or you don't have a glass of water, you don't have water to drink. You know what I mean? So it needs that structure to flow. And Kapha, nourish, if you're overnourished, or if you have imbalanced Kapha, so if you're imbalanced nourished, like if you're nourishing with contentment food, Y'all know what contentment food is? I think we all do, right? If we're nourishing with that, then water and earth make mud in the body. So remember that water and earth make mud. So this is the reason why coffee gets kind of sluggish or stagnant. In Ayurveda, we would say dams in the rivers or muddy pools, muddy lake, you know, and that's when like the lungs are muddy, you know, meaning they're gunked up, you know, how medical I speak, right?
Mm-hmm.
I talk total basic language that people are like, yeah, I feel gunked up in my lungs. I'm like, yeah. And then we can start saying, what kind of gunk is that? You know? But I'll be like, man, there's just some sticky stuff in there. You feel that? Because we know that. We just need to be asked, or like, otherwise we just feel it and then we're scared. Honestly, that's what happens mostly, is someone's like, oh, I feel like I'm gunked up in there. I keep spitting this stuff up. And then they're like, hope I'm okay. You know? Or it's not giving you a disease yet, so there's nothing to find if you go to do a lab, you know? So docs are great when you have a disease or an emergency. I mean, they keep people alive every single day. You will want them in your time of need, you know? But early detection is different, you know, being able to be like, God, there's a heaviness. I just can't quite give a deep expansion, okay? So these are the ideas of Vata, Pitta, Kapha. They're called the doshas, if I translate to the word humors. So like characters of the elements. And they just started saying, why chase ether and air around when they're always working together? And that fire and water, and that water and earth. So water and earth are easy water to think about, because it's like the river has to flow. We need waterworks, right? We need fluids to get from one place to another to survive. This water and pitta, I want to take a moment to explain. So pitta's function, you have three primary functions for each one. Vata is about releasing gaseous exchange. All gases, air, ether. Pitta's function is assimilation and absorption. And we'll even talk about which organs and tissues. They're all organs that assimilate and absorb. All the organs of Vata are things that are about gaseous exchange. So it'll make a lot of sense. And everything in Kapha is going to be around waterworks, water and earth, the waterworks of the body. And that's the mention of the kidneys. So now that we got that straight, when we look at assimilation, absorption, the primary function of Pitta, everything you put in your body, like food, turns to liquid. And we can only absorb. We have to assimilate it with fire. We got to break it down, assimilate it. Everything turns to a liquid. Then the liquid can be absorbed. So when you think of assimilation, absorption in the body, you have to think that you need enough coals on the fire to keep things warm, and then warm liquefies to keep things flowing. So like, I'll give you an example, simple. Butter in a pan. It's just a glob until you turn the heat on. As soon as you turn the heat on, the butter starts melting and spreading and turning to liquid. So Pitta, fire, is about assimilating our toxins and liquefying them to get them out safely. But it's also about liquefying the food we put into our stomach and turning it to a liquid so that there's not so much work that has to happen in there, you know, to help you break down the food any further. So the stomach is a perfect example of an organ that is Pitta in function and assimilates and absorbs all of your food. Okay, so here we now know ether and air work together, fire and water work together, water and earth work together. We know there's these words, Vata, change, Pitta, focus, Kapha, nourish. If you could change, focus, nourish as needed, everything would work great. But life happens. And sometimes you're going to notice that, you know, you get some toxicity and then you really need to be like, doesn't matter, you know, I need to cleanse. Other times you're going to have to notice, and the one that we don't notice the most is depletion. We don't notice when we're like running on empty, all adrenaline, junkied out, and not even considering I am running on pure adrenaline, I have no juice left. Kind of a little bit where what happens socially, you know, we have to answer those phone calls and text really quick, and we got to get the answer quick, and we got to take care of the world quick, and we got to take care of ourselves quick, and we got to do it all right, really quick. you know? And we have a lot more chemicals in our environment that cause a lot more interactions for us. So a lot of these things are drying us out. And we also don't have very good value of kapha. If somebody learns Ayurveda, they're like, ooh, I've even had people be like, well, I'm just glad I'm not kapha because I don't want to gain any weight. And I'm like, oh my God, kapha's nourish. They give the best hugs. They're love bugs. They care about everybody. You wanna not have any provider role. You don't want to have any heart and juice, and you know what I mean? And so it's like, you know, we gotta trust that kapha. Nobody wants to have excess or imbalanced kapha. But it's interesting how much we'll let ourselves have imbalanced vata, or how we'll let ourselves have imbalanced pitta. You know, where we're flaring too much and running too hot and running on empty. So we'll have to really look at this. And one thing I like to do in my classes is, and I'm doing good with my time, I like to make sure you get remedies for each one. I don't want to teach you a philosophy and then be all, okay, have fun. So I'll make sure that I'm giving like really cool remedies, you know, for each one of these as we go through them. And